Thank you, Sister Linda, and good afternoon to all. Assalamu alaikum, Jambo, peace, hello, all that good stuff. I want to say to the previous speakers that I appreciate the depth of your words and the concepts in which you have shared. I hope that my portion will bring some answers to the questions that you asked in terms of solutions. I hope that my portion will help to enrich some of the thoughts that was already expressed. I am Takuna Malana El Shabazz, a runaway slave who has, by the grace of Allah, declared my own freedom and is now fighting for yours. I cling to the status of Kuji Chagalia, self-determination, which means to define man and speak for self rather than to be defined, named, and spoken for by others. I was at a gathering such as this, and I spoke those words in terms of introducing myself. And there was an elder in the audience immediately stood up in a combative tone to challenge me. And he said to me, he said, "What do you mean? You ran away from a plantation. You're not old enough to be on no plantation. I knew you before you knew you. I knew your mama. I knew you when you was in your mama's belly." And he was very combative, and he was very aggressive. So I took his chastisement politely, and I listened to the elder. And I said to the elder, "Yes, sir, you are right. I'm not old enough to claim to have lived on a plantation." And he gave me a satisfactory smile. And then I paused for a few moments and I said, "And I'm also right, sir." So he again looked at me with a combative look. And then I said to him, "If you live in the north, if you live in the south, if you live on the east coast, if you live on the west coast, if you live in middle America, if you think white, act white, don't know who you are, and don't know your black self, you will make your plantation wherever you are."
All right now.
Because the plantation I ran from was not a physical plantation. The plantation I ran from was a mental plantation. I don't think white. I don't act white. I think free. I'm a black man. I know I'm a black man. I think and act and perceive myself and demand that I be treated as a black man. That's the plantation that I ran from. And then he looked at me, and I could see that his combative spirit had settled down. And then after the presentation, he came up to me and he said, he said, "You're never too old to learn something." And we shook hands warmly. Black history celebrations are a time for black people to showcase their truth for the purpose of reflecting, teaching, inspiring, guiding, building, recovering, and restoring a black value system for future generations to nurture by every day. The basis of all we know, the basis of all we need and want as a people starts with the knowledge of self. That includes our spiritual orientation, historical and cultural relevance, our economic, social, and political potency. Dr. Amos Wilson, I think, said it best when he said, "To manipulate history is to manipulate consciousness. To manipulate consciousness is to manipulate power." However, as you already had a taste of just with the previous presenters. When you study black history, you must be prepared to study the good, the bad, and the ugly. So given your theme, black state of affairs, we're going to study the good, the bad, and the ugly. Now that open statement, black state of affairs, in it has a question that is not being asked, and it's basically been brought out by a couple of the speakers. And that question is, what kind of shape we're in? Where are we? What's up, black folks? That's what the question actually begs. So we're going to talk about that. And I want to set a backdrop for you. I want to share with you the sheepdog theory. Now I know we're in an institutional setting. How many of you heard of the sheepdog theory? Well, let me share with you what the sheepdog theory is about. Let's first look at that word theory. Theory is a supposition or system of ideas intended to explain something, especially one based on a general principle independent of the thing to be explained. And two, an idea used to account for a situation or justify a course of action. Now, sheepdog. There is no natural sheepdog. Let me repeat that. There is no natural sheepdog. Meaning, you cannot go to a litter of puppies or to any form of dog and say, that's a sheepdog. That's a sheepdog. This one here is a sheepdog. It does not matter what breed. It does not matter what part of the country you're from. There is no natural sheepdog. But what is also true is that there is a reality that there is a sheepdog. So how does one account for a sheepdog if there's no natural sheepdog? Because a sheepdog is a dog that has been processed. So a sheepdog is one who desires to process a dog into a sheepdog, goes to a litter of puppies and snatches the ones that are to be made into a sheepdog, take that puppy and put among a fertile sheep who is nursing. That dog then nurses off of the sheep. That dog is not allowed to associate with dogs ever again. That dog nurses off the sheep, hangs with the sheep. That dog doesn't go to happy dog hour with other dogs. That dog hangs with sheep. That dog knows nothing but sheep. So the nature of that dog becomes closely attached to the sheep. So now everything that is natural about that dog still barks, still wags his tail, still has a natural sense of defense, still bites, still barks. Everything that's natural to the dog still is with the dog, but everything that is natural for the dog and to the dog goes to the benefit of the sheep. A sheepdog will bite another dog. A sheepdog will growl at its cousin, the wolf, for coming after the sheep. A sheepdog will attack anybody who damages or threatens the sheep. A sheepdog is loyal to the sheep herder. And the best sheepdog is the dog who can bite, run, jump, and bark, but not know he's a dog, but takes care of the sheep. And the sheep herder will reward that dog. So when you got a dog that acts like a dog, then that dog has no value to the sheep herder. So a sheepdog is a dog that has been processed out of itself. Doesn't even know he's a dog. Don't want to hang around with dogs. Yeah, I ain't got no business for no dog thing. I got my sheep to take care of. That's a sheepdog. Now, why would I lay that for you as a backdrop? Because the problem is, we as a people have been processed into a new people. We see ourselves not as being, we have been processed to the point where we are not to allow to see ourselves as black and African people, but as Negroes, Coons, Jigaboos, Coloreds, Negroes, Creoles, Cajuns, and now African Americans rather than Africans in America, if you please, or black if you dare. We have been like the sheepdog, socially engineered to suckle up the wrong historical breast, the wrong culture breast, the wrong political and spiritual breast, for the express purpose of keeping black people divided, non-combative, and manageable to service the system of white supremacy as modern-day slaves. So you ask the question in your theme. What's the black state of affairs? Well, let me put it this way. By and large, most black people in America have been made codependent upon a morally decadent, Eurocentric, westernized society. And where the children of former slaves still refuse to think much differently than the children of the former slave owners. Part of this is due to the fact that our institutions of learning have not and still do not impart most of the curriculums that are needed to invoke out of black learners the best of who he and she is, with a truthful perspective of their black and African ancestors. It has already been mentioned here, and in terms of the importance of school, most of our black children, in the schooling that we give them, the schooling that we permit them to go through, they are systematically denied historical accuracy, cultural relevance regarding their black selves. This has produced a generation of talented black people with a buckwheat syndrome about their history and culture. Now, those of you of my age, and even now, even if you're younger than I am, you have some image of who Buckwheat is. Buckwheat is that little character that played in the Little Rascals. And I say, it doesn't matter what age you are, because they are beginning to reinforce or rerun those stereotypical images of black people. They even running towards it again. They put a white man in the jungle with a diaper on, get him to holler. They say he's been raised by apes. He's got a better vocabulary than me and you. And they tell you he's king of the jungle. Well, the Little Rascals is a stereotypical show that portrays black in a very negative way. But Buckwheat was the little dark-skinned one that was in the Little Rascal. Never combed his hair. He was always clever. He always seemed to know more than the rest, but he never got credit for things. So the Buckwheat syndrome that we're giving our children in school is like what they portrayed in Buckwheat. When they asked Buckwheat one time, they were doing some community things, and they needed to identify their parents, and so little Spanky came and all the rest of them came. They said, well, you have to register. You know, they have to register their name. They have to register where they're from. So everybody came. Spanky came up there, and all the little white kids came up there, gave their name and address. When he got to Buckwheat, he said, where you from? Buckwheat, what's your name? He said, I's got no mammy. I's got no pappy. I's just grows up. See, that's what we teaching our children. We're allowing our children to get the kind of education that allow them to master mathematics, allow them to master science, allow them to master the skill of reading, but somebody else controls what they read because they do not have a basic knowledge of themselves. Listen, while we're on education, I just have to share this part with you for sure. Listen, brothers and sisters, you're talking about solutions. Well, one of them is you have to first come to grips with the fact You cannot teach a chicken how to be a duck. I'm going to repeat that. You cannot teach a chicken how to be a duck. If you send a chicken to duck school, and in that school, the curriculum is based on duckology, but the chicken goes to that school. Because you go to the school because I want my chicken to go to the school because the buildings are better. I want my children to go to that school because they have better lunches. I want my chicken to go to that school because my chicken has a right to go. And then they tell you when your chicken go to that school under duckology that everybody's the same. You're one and the same because both of you got feathers. They give you the logic and the argument that both your chicken and your duck are the same because we both lay eggs. But if you sit on a duck egg long enough, what's going to hatch out? If you sit on a chicken egg long enough, what's going to hatch out? But in the school of duckology for the chicken, the duck learns about his enemy and his friends and his history. The chicken is taught duckology. And to pass and to be successful in the school with a curriculum that promotes duckology, the chicken has to forget about being chicken, has to forget total about his chickenness in order to become successful in that school. So the chicken succeeds. The chicken forgets the quack. The chicken forgets the cackle because he's got to learn how to quack. So he forgets totally his chickenness. But then the chicken wants to be so successful, and he's got proud chicken parents at home. And he wants to make his parents proud. So he works hard, and he masters the duckology. And in his history class, he is told and taught that, as part of his history, that a chicken hawk is his friend. Because they both have feathers. And that the chicken hawk has a chicken name in it. So the chicken hawk is your friend. That's your history. So the chicken works hard, and at time of graduation, he shows up. All the ducks and the little duck families come out there. And here comes the chicken. Here's the chicken family come up there. And then they announce that the chicken was so proficient that he was first in his class. Matter of fact, he had mastered everything. He became a better quacker than the ducks. Now, I said quacker, not crackers. How much you gonna run down here and talk about I came here and started calling people crackers? I said he was the best quacker in town as a chicken. He done forgot how to cackle. So he's rewarded by being the best file in duckology school. So now he graduates and he's rewarded with his degree. And he's allowed to have and to be part of and rewarded handsomely for setting up a chain of fried chicken places. He has learned to master how to cook chicken 10 different ways. But he is rewarded handsomely. He's the CEO of 5 to 10 different chicken places. Now, in order for his business to survive, he's got to cook chickens. So now he's got to go back to his community and kill his own community in order to get the resources he needs to keep his business going. But he's the first chicken ever graduated from duckology school. He's got better feathers than everybody else. He's proud. He's educated because now he can live in the duck communities. Brothers and sisters, I sat with a college student, some college students several months ago. A bright student. And we sat at a table and we were talking about Black and African affairs. And the question came from this bright student who was aspiring to be an attorney said to me, "How do you be black in Africa?" Nowhere on the face of the earth you're going to have that question asked among any group of people. You're not going to go to China and ask the Chinese people, and the Chinese people say, "How you be Chinese?" You're not going to go to Japan and they're going to ask, "How you be Japanese? How you be Mexican?" We're the only people that have to ask that question, "How you be black in Africa?" That's because we send our chicken to duck school. And we want to know why we have, I think, the number of degree people we have, the number of non-functional, disconnected politicians, the disconnected so-called doctorate degree people in our midst, and we have no real serious impact from their skills. They've been to to duck school and they're chickens. They don't know what the community is. Brothers and sisters, let me say this clearly. We are not lacking in the skills and ability to do for ourselves. What we are lacking is the authority over our skills and ability due to a lack of knowledge of self. As a result, we set priorities, approach our concerns, and celebrate our successes from the perception, history, and nature of our oppressors. Because we act against our very nature, we negate our own progress for real liberation. We cannot reach our full human potential as a people under these circumstances, nor can we benefit as we should collectively from those who are talented among us. This is why it is easy for outside forces to control and manipulate us through one or more of the internal enemies that lies dormant in all of us, namely greed, fear, jealousy, pride, ignorance, and arrogance. Nonetheless, as my sister said earlier, we have a tendency to get in arenas like this and we simply want to redefine or repeat the problems without actually discussing or getting to the root cause of the problems. Listen, for example, we all know many of our communities are being disproportionately impacted with drugs and drug use and violence and poverty. Now, throw in the mix mistrust, miseducation, political disenfranchisement, poor health care, police brutality and terrorism, a lack of group response to fortify our economic, political, and business interests of the community. No doubt, nobody can argue that. No doubt, we have the perfect recipe for perpetual self-hatred and destruction in many of our communities. The brilliant wickedness of this system, this systemic racist setup, is that victims actually blame other victims for their victimization without any knowledge of the impact of the laws and the cause and effect by the millions and multitude of levels of inherent racist system that governs our community. So, sister, you asked for a solution. Let me suggest one. But before I do that, let me say, what have we been using as a solution? Of course, many of us use as our main outlet has been to fill up black churches on Sunday morning for 2 to 3 hours to receive a spiritual crack hit and pray and sing to white Jesus to give us the strength to endure 6 more days of hell until next Sunday. This has been our response. This is typically the state of the affairs of black people. Now that may not be good sounding to your ears, but I would wager that you would not argue with me and win on facts. So what's the solution? Know that it sounds nice to say we must all stick together, we must all support one another, We must unify, etc., etc., etc. This is what we say all the time. Ultimately, we must reach that resolve or continue to suffer the dire consequences. The pressing issue today is not whether we should come together or why, but rather, how do we get there? I ask again, how do we get there? May I offer a solution that many of you don't like to hear, but I think you might be ready for it today. May I offer the concept of separation as a viable solution? On the surface, the term separation and unity appears to be diametrically opposing in nature. However, in separation, there is unity. I speak not of isolation or the return of unjust segregated laws. I speak of a necessary form of separation to obtain true unity for us. The so-called false concept of integration has not worked for us. The so-called false concept of integration has not worked for us. I want to share with you briefly 5 ways integration underdeveloped Black America. The first way it underdeveloped Black America was that Black America's wealth stagnated or declined after integration. I think some spoke to that point. During segregation, blacks were forced to start and support the businesses in their own communities. Many of these businesses flourished and even helped some black communities, such as the Greenwood community in Tulsa, Oklahoma, often called the Black Wall Street, wealthier than their white neighbors. After segregation ended, African Americans flocked to support businesses owned by whites and other groups, causing black restaurants, theaters, insurance companies, banks, etc. to almost disappear. Today, black people spend 95% of their income at white-owned businesses. Even though the number of black firms has grown 60.5% between 2002 and 2007, they only make up 7% of all U.S. firms and less than 0.005% of all U.S. business receipts in 1985. Business receipts in 1865, just after the Emancipation Proclamation, 476,748 free blacks, 1.5% of the U.S. population, own 0.005% of the total wealth of the United States. Today, a full 151 years later, after the abolishment of slavery, 44.5 million black Americans, 14.2% of the population, possess a meager less than 1% of the nation's wealth. Now, 2, black family structure collapsed after integration. From 1890 to 1950, black women married at a higher rate than white women, despite a consistent shortage of black men due to higher mortality rates. According to a report released by the Washington, D.C. based think tank Urban Institute, the state of African American families is worse today than it was in the 1960s, 4 years before President Johnson passed the Civil Rights Act. In 1965, only 8% of childbirth in the black community occurred out of wedlock. In 2010, that figure was 41%. And today, out of wedlock childbirth in the black community is at an astonishing 72%. Researchers Heather Ross and Isabel Sawhill argued that marital stability is directly related to the husband's relative social economic standing and the size of the earning difference between men and women. Instead of focusing on maintaining black male employment to allow them to provide their family, Johnson passed the Civil Rights Act with full affirmative action for women. The act benefited mostly white women and created a welfare system that encouraged the removal of black males from the home. Many black men were also dislodged from their families and pushed into a rapidly expanding prison industrial complex that developed in the wake of the rising unemployment. 3. The unemployment rate of black men quadrupled after integration. Now this is the integration so many of us love and ready to fight for. See, the chicken went to duck school. Since integration, the unemployment rate of black men has been spiraling down out of control. In 1954, white men had a 0% unemployment rate, while African American men experienced about a 4% rate. By 2010, it was 16.7% for black men compared to 7.7% for white men. Today, those numbers are much higher. The workforce in 1954 was 79% African American. By 2011, that number had decreased to 57%. The number of employed black women, however, has increased in 1954. In 1954, 43% of African American women had jobs. By 2011, 54% of black women were job holders. Although the earning gap between African Americans and their white peers were narrow, it still persists, with a black man earning about 70% of a white man's income. In 1960, black men earned about 60% of what white men were paid. Fourth reason why integration has underdeveloped the black community: the myth of a colorblind society promulgated after integration. The civil rights movement pushed for laws that would create a colorblind society which people would not be restricted from access to education, job, voting, traveling, public accommodation, or housing because of race. However, legislation has been ineffective in eradicating white privilege. Michael K. Brown, professor of politics of University of California, Santa Cruz, and co-author of Whitewashing Race and the Myth of a Colorblind Society, said in the U.S., the color of one's skin still determines success or failure, poverty or affluence, illness or health, prison or college. Colorblind policies that treat everyone the same, with no exception for the historical, oppressed, and disenfranchised, are often used to argue against corrective policies such as affirmative action. But colorblindness today merely bolsters the unfair advantages that color-coded practices enable white Americans to accumulate over a very long period of time. And the last reason: black community after integration, became dependent. African Americans have appealed to the descendants of our oppressors to right their ancestors wrong, pay us sufficient wages, to take care of our families, educate our children, and police our neighborhoods. As a result, only 2% of all working black Americans work for other black persons within their own neighborhood. Because of this, professionally trained black people provide very little economic benefit to the black community. The black median household income is about 64% that of whites, while the black median wealth is about 16% of that of whites. Millions of black children are being miseducated by people who do not care about them, and they are unable to compete academically with their peers. At the same time, the criminal justice system has declared war on young black men with policies such as stop and frisk and 3 strikes and you're out. Now that's the benefit of integration. This is what we wanted, not understanding in a matured way what integration was intended to do. We have recent incidents. Look at the national focus now that is given to Beyonce and Brother ZJ, because they simply danced and had symbols and emblems of the Black Panthers. White America is in an uproar. As someone said earlier, we have a black president who can't utter the word reparation, cannot take on any issues, but we integrate. Look at Flint, Michigan. You don't have to go to Michigan to find environmental racism and disaster. You can go right here in Cancer Alley that was mentioned earlier. You can go right here to St. Joseph, Louisiana, right, and find more lead in the black community there than some people got in their guns.
Preach. Yes.
You don't have to go that far. So let me make my case for separation, if I may. Just a few minutes. Let me prove to you what I'm saying. I want you to reason with me for a moment. In order for you to achieve unity, you must separate yourself from the enemies of unity to acquire unity. Let me put it in another context. If you're a drug user or if you smoke, and you choose not to use drugs anymore, or you choose not to smoke anymore, there must be a change in your thought pattern. There must be a change in your behavior. There must be a change in your social structure. You must separate yourself from those things. If you're a non-smoker, you don't want to be around folks who smoke. Because you don't want to engage in the secondhand smoke disaster that you inflict on yourself. So you separate yourself from those who smoke in your presence. Doesn't mean you hate anybody, just means you got enough sense and enough knowledge to know that you're not going to self-inflict cancerous cells into your body. And if you're a smoker and you choose not to smoke anymore, then you must make a conscious decision to separate yourself from the nicotine. You cannot go in the same environment, because the environment that you go into as a smoker will also be there and will trigger you again into the same habit. If you're a drug user and don't want to use drugs anymore, you can't go hang on the corner with the crackheads. You can't have happy hour at the crack house. You got to change some things. You got to separate yourself from that behavior. You got to separate yourself from that environment. Now, that may not have sunk in for some of you, but let me share another one then. God forbid if anybody in here is a victim of rape, or know anybody who is a victim of rape. That's a terrible crime for a female. But when a woman is violated in such a violent way, even psychologists and social workers in the police force, they will not permit a male to deal with that female until an appropriate time. It will be a female officer that will question the woman. It will be a female psychologist who will question the woman. It's a female social worker that will question the woman. That woman must be separated from all males given her experience. Not because she hates men. She must be separated from her husband. She will be separated from her sons. All the ones that she loved as a male. Why? Not because she's some fanatic and hate men. Because a period of separation is needed for her to regroup and to recover from the ills of the violent act, so that she can become whole again. She must separate for a period of time to regroup, to heal, so that she can gain her full faculties as a responsible sensitive, emotional human being that was violated by a man of the opposite gender. That's intelligent separation. That's the kind of stuff that, I mean, you don't have to go, you can even learn that in duck school. Even if you're a chicken. That's intelligent separation. So now, you're going to have those that say, whose mouth, when soon we say the word separation, or their mouth drop about 6 inches. They get all puffed up. We're in America. Why you want to talk about separation? We fought and died to try to integrate. That's because you went to duck school, chicken. See, let me give you an argument for people who say that to you. I would just guess that probably 99% of you in here celebrate what you call the 4th of July. To me, it's the 4th of July because I know history. I'm a black man. Remember, I told you I'm a runaway slave. I'm a free-thinking black man. I can read, but I know what to read. The 4th of July represents a time of white folk separation. In 1776, it was 13 little colonies that told the British Empire, give me liberty or give me death. I'm separating from you. Right. Why are you going to separate from me, little 13 little colonies? Because, King George, you want to tax me on my niggers now. My niggers who made me wealthy. You want to tax me on my niggers now. And then you want to treat me unfairly in so many other ways. And then when we ask you, King George, to give us more reinforcements so that we can go kill all those indigos that we call savages, you were slow in coming. So we pissed off at you, King George, so we want to separate. What you going to separate? New little 13 little colonies? We're going to form the United States. They separated. Every year you get your mouth all greasy with pork chops and pork ribs, buying white folks beer, buying white folks food, going and celebrating their stuff, financing their separation, and then somebody come up to you and talk about let's separate. I want integration. That's insane. You see? That's insane. And soon somebody tell you anything about the 4th of July, well, it's an American day. Well, how did America come into existence? War and revolution, separation. What did they cry for? Unity. How you going to get unity in America? Separate. Who are you separating from? King George. Who was King George? Another group of white folks. They separated. Under certain circumstances, it is intelligent for you to separate. Now, we come to the ultimate question that some of us don't want to deal with, because most of us have attended duck school, and we're chickens. So when you leave here with all your degrees, with all your knowledge, you're going to go back and you're going to do things in your own chicken community that is not good for your chickens, because you don't have a proper perspective. So the ultimate question then becomes, if you know this to be true, and this is the history, who and what are the enemies to unity for black people? Who raped you from the shores of Africa and stripped you of your name, your God, your culture, your history? Like the sheepdog, we have been socially engineered to thinking and behaving the way we do. We must separate from the forces that created and continue to perpetuate those destructive behaviors in us. Like the sheepdog, there is no natural nigger. That's a manifestation of what the system of white supremacy produced. So all the problems you talk about in our community, I don't care what it is. Talk about black folks killing black folks. That's a lie. Black folks don't kill black folks. You got niggers and coloreds and Negroes kill black folks.
Right.
That's something, the manifestation of slavery. A black man and a black woman who is truly black and civilized don't behave that way. So when they tell you these things, and you've been to chicken school, and you've got nothing, and you're full of duckology, you fall for that kind of stuff. And then when you become affluent in your community because they allow you to have a little bit of money, or they give you a little bit of title, then you revert back to being a sheepdog. You're going to protect the master in his system. You're going to protect the sheepdog, the master, the system in politics. You protect his system in economics. And you inflict danger on yourself because you're a sheepdog doing your job. And you don't know it. Listen, brothers and sisters, I want to make clear, in search of your true black and African self, you cannot lose your humanity in the process. Skin color is not the full measure of a man or woman. However, you must reject white supremacist minded people wherever you find them. And believe me, you will find them in skin as black as my shoes. We can have a room full of black people. I've been there. You've been there. Full of black people, and the white man is still there.
That's right.
Because he's in our mind. And oftentimes, because you can have 500 black folks in a room. One white person stepped into the room, listen to an audience like this. Most of us, our psychic change. Look how most of you look at the white folks when I say certain things. You want to see what it is and fell out the chair. They seem to be very calm. But if you're the one that's sick, you're the one that's going to look at that white boy every time I say something. Your psychic is messed up. You see? Your psychic is messed up. Therefore, before you can be physically separated, there has to be a mental separation. You can be right in the middle of black, white folks and still be black and African and proud. Your imposition of being a slave oftentimes is self-imposed because of your psychic, because of your sheepdog experience. I dress like this every day. When I go places, people wonder what part of Africa I'm from. Not if I'm from Africa, what part of Africa I'm from. And when I start speaking English, they all shocked, you know. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be speaking, but there's a different persona that they get from me. And I can see racist white folks say, one nigger with me, miss. He's off the plantation. But then he doesn't have to bother with me. Why? Because he's got a room full of plantation-thinking Negroes, acting like a sheepdog, protecting the masses' interests, laughing when nothing's funny. Got money and can't use it for your own community. Look at the black athletes and the multi-millions of dollars the sister spoke of. And look at the struggle she's having with a beautiful effort like the Black Museum. You got multi-millions of dollars that come from the resources of the black community in terms of talent, in terms of intellect, in terms of athleticism. But you have right now 70% of black football players marry white women. Why? You got 72% of black basketball players that are millionaires marry white women. Why? Because when they get to that level of life, they say, well, I want the best in life. So what's the best? What's the best? I want a white woman. Now, look how sick that is, those of you who are in social work and psychology. They'll tell you in the dark room every time you get some counseling, well, you know, you marry your mother. And they tell the girls, you know, you really look for characteristics in your daddy. We the only one to act silly like that. That's a chicken man and a duck. And you think that if somebody opposes you because you want to do that, that they're the racist. They created a word for it. They call it reverse racism. And you fall for it because you're a chicken that went to duck school. And you got aspirations to fit into the sheepdog mentality because the sheep herder has weaned you off of your natural breast of your beginning and put you on the breast of a sheep. So therefore it makes sense to you. So whatever talent you have, whatever gifts that God may have given you, doesn't go to our people. Chinese people are not expected to be less Chinese to build an economic, political, social, and spiritual system for themselves. That's because their value system is predicated on a healthy perspective of their history and culture. History has proven that any group of people that make their history and culture negotiable and debatable for misperceived political and educational gains, that group was the major factor of its own economic, social, and spiritual despair. Look, I'm going to end with this, brothers and sisters. The solution that we're looking for in terms of separation does not mean that you got to start shunning white people or brown people or green people or polka dot people. It just means you must make a personal commitment to be black and African uncompromisingly, unapologetically. You must learn what your diet is. You're the only people that was stripped from a land and everything was taken from you, including your diet. Could you imagine? Could you imagine an elephant eating the diet of a lion? Could you imagine? Your diet was even taken away. You have to go back and you have to recover what made your ancestors the way they are. What's your connection to food? How does that play with that black melanated body? If you take a car and that's a Mercedes-Benz and you put Kool-Aid in it, what kind of function you going to get out of that car? Talking about, oh, I got a Mercedes-Benz. And you're putting Kool-Aid in the tank. You can talk about, I'm the first man and woman. I'm the mother and father of civilization. And in the next breath, you're fighting for a minority portion. You allow yourself to be called niggers, colored Negroes. And Lafayette, these Negroes has personified black Cajun. Cajun, a word from our historical base.
Preach.
It's synonymous with the word nigger. Matter of fact, when white folks call us niggers, the most hurtful response, the most hurtful word that we could use toward white folks who referred to us as niggers was to call them Cajuns. And now they have taken that word, cleaned it up. They have cleaned up their historical gutter word, and now they want to brand it on everybody else. There's a form of white nationalism. There's a form of colonialism. And the sheepdogs in Lafayette think I'm the one's crazy because I argue with the sheep herder. You can't, brothers and sisters, continue to ignore this. Solution, sister? Before we discuss any solution and give an agenda to anybody, if Hillary called right now and said, Sister Hill,